Hi guys, this is Ms.Checka. I am in Stockholm, Sweden, and I am standing right in front of the water. Behind me is the Baltic, and way behind me are a whole bunch of ships and a building that looks like a ship. It has masts coming out of it, and that building is the Vasa Museum. And honestly, that's one of the coolest museums I've ever been to in my life, and I have been to a very large amount of really cool museums. So that museum is dedicated to the story of the Vasa, which I'm about to tell you right now. And the Vasa was a ship, okay? So let's go backwards in time, still in Stockholm, but let's put ourselves in 1628. So in 1628, Stockholm was not the huge city that you see around you, all bustling. It was a town that had like 15,000 people, and the king lived here, as the king still lives here. And it was a country then as now very much connected to the water, right? As you can see, ships. And the king at the time, whose name was Gustavus Adolphus II, he wanted a warship that was bigger and better and mightier and more powerful than anything else that he had in his fleet. So he goes to these shipbuilders and he describes what he wants, and what he wants is a lot of guns. He wants a lot of guns, and when I say guns, what I really mean is cannons, okay? So these shipbuilders are like, all right, we're gonna do it. So the way that shipbuilding worked in the 1700s in Sweden is that if you were an expert, you would have a table that had measurements, right? And these measurements would help you know what dimensions to make everything. And in some cases, that table was so important that it might have been passed down to you from your dad. But what people did not have was the technology and the mathematical skills to make calculations for stability. And when I say stability, I mean like this business, right? So shipbuilders are gonna know a lot about like what floats, what dimensions to make things, but it's pretty hard to calculate how much it can do of this because water moves, it's not very stable. So what these guys did, and I'm speculating a little bit here, but what I gather is that they kind of tripled the recipe, right? So they took these tables of measurements, they built a big, huge ship, but if you're going to add more guns, then you have to make the ship higher, because whenever you add cannons, you're basically adding another deck. So they built this massive ship. This is the Vasa, and the whole city of Stockholm could see it, and they could see it being built. Before it leaves the harbor, the shipmaster takes a look at it and says, guys, I don't think that's gonna work. So he invites an admiral to come and see it, and he does a little experiment. He has 30 men run up and down the deck of the ship, which is a normal thing that would happen if the ship were out to sea, right? After the third time that these 30 men went across, the admiral's like, no, stop, you're gonna sink the ship, because the ship was teetering like this so dangerously. And so the shipmaster thought like, oh, okay, he sees that this is obviously a really bad idea. And instead the admiral said, well, if only the king were home, if only His Majesty were home, we'd be able to tell him, which is code for, I'm not telling anybody. I'm not gonna be the one to tell the king, you know, we don't have the incredibly expensive ship that you've been waiting several years for, that you've been watching in the harbor. So he didn't do anything, he didn't tell anybody, they sent it off. And not only did they send it off, they have this huge celebration because the whole town has been watching it being built, right? And to imagine the size of this thing, picture this. There are 1,000 oak trees, 1,000 oak trees that had to be cut down to make it. It's 4 stories high. It has, there's hundreds of people on board, because for a ship that size, you need a whole lot of crew to make her move, but then on top of it, they have several hundred soldiers, because it's a military ship, it's a warship, right? So you have to have hundreds of guys to man the cannons and so on and so forth. So there's a huge number of people on the ship, there's a huge number of people on the shore, and on top of it, and I find this to be kind of the most tragic thing, is that they have, they've let the crew members invite members of their family. So even though normally on a warship you wouldn't have women and children, on that day, for that occasion, you had the soldiers, you had the crew, and you had women and children. So the whole town goes out. Ship doesn't make it even 1,300 meters. 1,300 meters, and there's a breeze. Seriously, a breeze. It wasn't a storm, it wasn't a hurricane, it wasn't anything like that. Breeze, it moves, then it rights itself, and then another wind, and then it moves, and then the whole thing goes down. And everybody can see it from the shore, right? So it's this terrible tragedy. People die, people have to jump off of it, people have to swim away, people try to rescue them. An admiral, different admiral, was on board, and he does get out, but when he's climbing his way out, his golden ring falls out, right? So basically, terrible tragedy happens in front of everybody, and the captain is arrested that day. And there's an inquest. Inquest is like a trial. So everybody wants to know, like, how could this happen? How could this happen? He says, you must have had everybody drunk on board, or I bet that you didn't attach the cannons correctly, and the cannons must have tilted, must have knocked everything over. And the captain has this great quote. He says, cut me into 1,000 pieces if the cannons were in the wrong place. So basically he was saying, like, I bet my life on, the cannons were fine. Hundreds of years later, it turns out he was right. Like, when they found the shipwreck, the cannons were completely in the right spot. Basically everybody blames each other. Captain blames the ship guys say, like, hey, we gave the designs to the king. Everybody blames each other, but the upshot is the ship is gone. So time goes by, and somebody figures out, this is still in the 1600s, how to make a diving bell go down and get the cannons. And diving bells are basically like when you put a cup of water, if you have something in the cup of water and you submerge it, there's a little bubble of air. So they did like that, and it looks like an upside down cup. Put it way, way, way down. They fished out all the cannons, sold them. But the rest of the ship was there for hundreds and hundreds of years. And if we were in a different part of the world, that'd be the end of the story. But we're right next to the Baltic, and the Baltic Sea does not have as much salt as other bodies of water do in the world. And because there's not as much salt, shipwrecks that go down there, they stay preserved. Another thing that's unusual here is that they don't have ship worms. So in other places, worms go and eat in the woods, and you can see them make tunnels. Here, they don't have that. So in the 1950s, this salvage guy heard from a professor that there was this ship from the 1600s intact, and he found it on like a little boat. He sent down his instruments, finds it, and a diver goes down, comes back out and says, holy crap, it's the Vasa. It's the Vasa after all these years. And the way that they knew is that there was a royal seal on there. So then the whole country gets so interested. How do we get it out? How do we get it out? They have a nationwide contest for people to give ideas. And people had crazy pants ideas. Like, one person said we should fill the whole ship with ping pong balls, and that'll make it float to the top. Somebody else said, let's make it into a giant ice cube, and then the ice cube will come up to the top. And the way that they actually got it out is almost as crazy pants as that. They spent 2 years building tunnels underneath the ship in the seafloor, and then put pontoons. And then the pontoons lifted it up like this, and hundreds of people came to see it. And you can imagine that it would be almost like seeing a ghost ship come out of nowhere, just massive ship coming out. And then it was almost entirely intact. You can go in there and see it. It is 98% original. The parts that they had to replace are things like the bolts had rusted. You know, they had to get new rope. And the amount of rope that they got, it's not measured in like yards or feet, it's measured in kilometers because this thing is so big. They had to dry it out for something like 17 years. It's very sensitive to moisture in the air. So like in the year 2000, there was a really rainy year in Sweden, and so many tourists were coming in damp that it actually damaged the ship a little bit. So it's this huge puzzle, and it's kind of like a treasure box for archaeologists. But I hope that one day you're able to come here and see this massive ship. I would remind you, just gently, if you're planning to make a huge, massive ship, you might want to try a little math beforehand. See if that sucker's gonna sink, you know, at the first breeze. Anyway, this is Ms. Checka. I'm out.